Welcome to the Arbitration Pitch with Lauraine Darkwah. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. And can you tell us a bit about yourself and your journey into arbitration?
Thank you, Lauraine, for having me over. And yeah, a quick journey. It's been a long one.
Okay.
I started off my practice as a litigation lawyer.
Okay.
In Nairobi, Kenya, where I practiced before the magistrates' courts, the High Courts, and the Court of Appeal, largely doing commercial disputes.
Okay.
And then a couple of years into my career, I opted to go and pursue a master's program, and this led me to Geneva.
Okay, a master's in what though?
A master's in international dispute settlement.
Okay.
It's a joint program between the Graduate Institute and the University of Geneva. And upon completion of this master's program, then I did training contracts. One with this firm, incidentally, about 4 years ago.
Okay.
And then another one with a prominent arbitrator in Brussels.
Okay.
And that experience led me to the ICC.
Oh.
Yeah, which is where now I got my first full-time job in arbitration space. And I worked at the ICC as a case manager for about 3 years.
Okay.
And then joined the Live. So that has been my trajectory.
Wow. You've been to so many different places, huh?
Getting a feel and just finding my footing.
Right. Yes. So talking about being a case manager, I think some people are of the view that in order to enter into the arbitration space, you have to first become an arbitrator or be appointed as an arbitrator before you properly enter the space. How did you use being a case manager to gain some experience in the field?
I think even before being a case manager, legal experiences before my role as a case manager did help and are instrumental in my day-to-day work. The first one, having practiced and worked in the law firm, already gave me a feel of what legal practice feels like, because it simply is carrying a continuation of the practice,
right?
But at a different level. So it's drafting of your pleadings,
right?
And drafting of correspondence, and so these very basic but relevant skills are continually honed as you carry on in the practice. So I think that built up. Now, as to the question of the case manager, that was a very useful and great eye-opener for me, because then I got to see firsthand several arbitrations across different sectors.
Right.
Seeing how arbitrators handled various procedural issues, seeing how parties pleaded various issues, seeing how procedural timelines are really critical to the efficiency of arbitration, because part of my work was to ensure that parties did comply with the rules of the institution that I was working with, and this does play a big role in the general arbitration industry.
Right.
So there are various ways people can come in to the practice. I also have colleagues who did come straight from other practices domestically into arbitration.
Yeah. That's amazing. And with regards to your educational path, because you mentioned that you did your master's and all that, are there some courses you recommend or certificate programs? I mean, I know of the obvious one, CIAB, but there's some certificate programs that people should take, which will be helpful in the arbitration career.
Yes, you've mentioned one that is important, which is a CIAB program. On top of that, there are specific tailored programs by the ICC
Okay.
On arbitration,
right,
for different levels, and these really can help in getting a broader understanding and also building the actual technical skills needed for the practice. And beyond certificate programs, there's also associations which
right,
are very helpful in building the people resource and the networks that could be instrumental in getting skills and other insights are needed for the industry. This could be the ICC, the YAF, for example, and others that are out there. So it helps to balance both the credential side, but also the network side.
Right. Yeah. And there's something interesting that you mentioned about the fact that there are various certificate programs out there. Now, I'd like to find out, when you take all these certifications, how do you get your first appointment as counsel, as an arbitrator? Maybe you could share your experience or how you know people do that, because there's this general outcry by a lot of young arbitration practitioners who go do their masters, who do certificate programs, and they can't find a way to break in. How do they do that?
There are a few avenues that I've seen used. One I mentioned is through these associations. It's a good link to the people in the industry who are actually doing these cases, and they do then give a few tips on the ropes in. But secondly, there's also tribunal secretary roles. So where you may know or have a partner or colleague in your law firm who is doing an arbitration matter,
right,
be it domestic, be it international, it is possible to request the said colleague,
right,
with the consent of the parties, of course, whether you can sit in and learn, whether you can be an arbitral secretary,
right,
which would then
with or without pay,
Yes, with or without pay. And these are ways in. Research also through
right,
publications is a way also to get your name out there, because we've seen instances where sometimes clients ask, have you published something in this space, just to demonstrate your knowledge and your expertise in this field. So these are some tips or some areas that one might think about,
right,
in order to get a foot in the door.
Right. And speaking about areas, what are some of the trending areas in arbitration that we see now?
There are various.
Tell me.
But I will speak more for the region I practiced in previously, and also the region I supervised
right,
cases, which was primarily the Anglophone Africa region and also Europe.
right,
The UK and Ireland. And a lot of cases were touching on construction.
famous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So infrastructure, construction, there's general trade. There are several contracts that do have arbitration clauses in them for supply of goods. And these really were activated, especially during COVID, when there was a disruption
right,
in supply chains, and therefore people were instituting claims, trying to preserve their respective positions. And that just gave a feel of how much in international business and your general contracts for trade and supplies, you'd have these arbitration agreements. So sector-wise, construction and infrastructure is leading, and energy as well. Yeah.
Interesting.
And in the regions I specified.
Yeah, I also think AI and technology is really coming up. And this not even with regards to arbitration, but the world in general. And I just think that everybody should make sure they have enough knowledge. It's not enough to say I'm old school or I'm not interested. There are so many things that are coming up, and we have to keep abreast with that. So thank you so much for mentioning those areas. Now we're rounding up our discussion, and I'd like you to tell us 3 things that you think that some young arbitration practitioners can work on, some character traits they can work on to ensure that they are great arbitration practitioners. And you can look at them and speak to them directly, if you may.
One I would say is persistence. This is a field that it takes time sometimes to break into, and it takes some resilience, some willingness to put yourself out there to be seen. So even if the opportunities do not present themselves today, it doesn't mean they never will.
Right.
So persistence is a good one. Another one that one of my bosses here once told me is rigor. Just the ability to read that correspondence 3 times over, that pleading 4 times over, and pick out the small mistakes that would set you apart from your contemporaries, and just going that extra step would really give you an edge in getting yourself out there, even in application letters and in the CV, just giving that attention to detail.
Right.
And then one more is culture. And arbitration being a mode of dispute resolution means you need to understand the people you're facing, whether you're sitting as arbitrator or sitting as counsel, and just an understanding of the culture of the people really does go a long way in reaching or in being effective, either as counsel in putting across your arguments or as arbitrator in trying to understand and reason out your decision in a matter that in several matters. And I think sometimes even parties do settle where these cultural issues are understood.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Benjamin. And this will be our final question. If Benjamin is not in the office talking or dealing with arbitration, what's he doing?
Well, if I am not in the office talking about arbitration, I'm running. I like going for a good run.
A lot of Kenyans run.
Yes, it is a stereotype, but true to some extent.
Yeah.
And hiking. So I really like being outdoors. Enjoying nature.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Benjamin, for spending time with us. We are so grateful.
Thank you for having me.
I believe this interview will be very useful to a lot of our young, upcoming arbitration practitioners.
Thank you very much as well.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.